In this video, we're going to be taking a look at godets, G-O-D-E-T. Godets are triangular inserts or other inserted panel shapes. They could be circular in shape, like a partial circle ruffle. They can have rectangular edges. They can be tall, they can be short, they can be handkerchiefed. But in this video, we're just going to be showing the basic concept of creating this extra flare on this skirt. She's frozen. I'll turn on the schematic here so you can see. We're going to create this straight skirt and taper it. We're going to do that from scratch using the drafting tools. Then we're going to create the godets and insert them all around. And at the end, we're going to add the shirring here, because it does take some resources to do that. And we'll change the fabric type as well. So now we're done with show and tell, so we will get started. Okay, so let's start with a brand new project. There's going to be nothing on the screen. Let's go to our library panel. We're going to bring in a default avatar. You can click on avatar, female version 2, and select one of the most recent 2.1 avatars. Let's choose whichever one you like. Actually, I'm just going to double click on Mia, and it's just going to bring the default size and the default shape, which is fine for our experimentation. And I have mine in the monochromatic surface, or we can do the textured surface, whichever you prefer. Now, before I get much further, I'm going to save the project just in case I crash, but also I'll be wanting to save certain history points during the project. So of course that's going to be File, Save. So just give it a name, hit save, and then you are good. Now we're going to draft a skirt shape by hand. When I say by hand, I mean from scratch, but it would be the same process if you were doing it by hand. So I'm going to take her hip measurement and add a few inches, and we're going to gather it into a waistband. So this will be a good opportunity for us to use the measurement tape. Now there's a couple ways I could cheat to find out her measurements, but I want to show you a couple of different ways. The first would be to go to Avatar, Avatar Editor, and of course we know that we can use this to fine-tune the avatar's size and shape with all these different settings here. If there are some measurements that you would have wanted to change but they're not here, you would just go to this little gear icon, and then you can activate the other measurement points that you want. But in this instance, I'm not worried about that. I just want to find out her fullest hip measurement. It's 37.5. So if I click on that, you'll see it highlights there, or I could even tap on these measurements. So she has about a 24-inch waist, about a 37.5-inch hip, but I'll give a little extra room there. And I also want to find out the length to about her knee. So that will bring us over here to the measurement, the basic tape measure. We want basic tape measure is just fine. So I'm just going to go from her natural waist to the knee, and we're about 25-26 inches. All right, so I'm going to assume about 40-41 inches for the hips, providing a little bit of ease. I'm going to basically make it a rectangle off of the hips, and I'll gather the rest of it into that 24-inch waist. Now to do that, we want to go over to our rectangle tool to draft a pattern. I'm just going to tap, and half of 24 is 12, but I'm going to give a little bit of ease, and this is going to be for the waistband, and let's make the waistband 1 inch. So this is going to represent the front waistband and the back waistband, because I'll do 2 of those. Now let's do the body. I'm going to draw a rectangle again, and let's do 21 inches. Oops, 21 inches in width, which is the approximate front width that I want. I'm doing about 42 inches to give a little ease. And for the height, let's do 29, and we'll click OK. So now this is representing the front of the skirt. Oops. And we can just kind of visualize here. Now I could take this and duplicate it for the front and back. However, I really would like to have symmetrical editing, which means anything I do to one side would automatically change on the other side. So right now, if I were to take, whoops, I'm still actively drawing rectangles here. So we're going to go to our Z edit pattern, which means we can edit points. So right now, if I make a change to one side, it does not affect the other side, of course. So what I would like to do instead is I'm going to cut these in half, and then I'm going to mirror them with linked editing. So my quick way of doing that is to use my X tool, drop down a point. I'm just going to hover on the line here and right click, uniform split into 2. And so that's just giving me a little marker there to draw an internal line from top to bottom. Now I'm going to highlight that, right click, and I'm going to cut it, delete the other side, Z tool, highlight, right click, and unfold symmetric editing with sewing. So now anything I do to one side will affect the other, as we know. And so now doing the same thing to the large rectangle, I'm going to do X, hover on the line, right click, uniform split 2 segments. Now internal line, I'm going to go to each end, right click, highlight, right click, we're going to cut, get rid of one side, it doesn't matter which side, Z tool, highlight, unfold symmetric editing with sewing. Now I like to see a little more contrast with what I'm looking at, so I'm going to turn on the schematic. It doesn't matter what color, it doesn't have to be black, as long as it's color that you can see, and that helped me right away. What'll help me as well is I think I would like to see the symmetric lines. Where did those go? Show internal lines, base lines. I don't know why they're not showing. Maybe it's not going to read this symmetric line as an internal line. Oh, let's test that out real quick. I'm just going to draw an internal line, and no, I don't see those. So either I forgot to use how to use the program here, or we have a little bug. Okay, so it looks like in baselines are not going to show up if we have schematic render turned on. And we have the garment texture, so that's not going to show up. Internal lines should, but symmetrical center lines are not showing up, and that's fine. We could live with that. But let's just test out an internal line real quick, which is this second one. And as a reminder, internal lines, which are red here, kind of a burgundy, those we can interact with our Z tool. However, baselines can only be interacted with the trace tool, which is shortcut I. And really the only thing you can really do with these is convert them to an internal line, or you can simply delete them. Now I can also select internal lines with the trace tool as well if I wanted to delete them. Alright, so we took care of that business, and these are actually positioned quite well. I might not need to worry about using my arrangement points to get this put together. Of course, we want to, when we go to sew this together and simulate, we know gravity is going to take effect, so we are going to want to start this waistband up a little higher. Now I'm going to select all of this, Control C and Control V, because we're just doing a second set. Just to go through the process, let's go ahead and use our arrangement points. We are in just regular textured surface, not the thick textured surface. The difference is, in this view, I'm able to see the back of my fabric to know that if I were to try to use the gizmo and move this, that it's backwards. Let's turn on the arrangement points. It makes life easier. I'm going to select this back skirt, hover on that dot. Same thing for the waistband, hover on that there. When we're done with the arrangement points, we're going to turn those off. Otherwise, we'll be accidentally placing things unintentionally. Alright, so we look good there. And now we're going to do some sewing. Segment sewing is just fine. This to this. Of course, it's going to gather. And the side seams. And the side seams of the waistband. So that takes care of all of that. And now we can simulate. Okay, now the reason why this is falling down quite a bit is it is the default fabric when we first start, which is very gummy. I only did about a 1/2 inch of ease as far as I remember. She had a 24-inch waist, and so that's 12 1/4, so I only did a 1/2 inch ease. So I am going to change this to a stable woven fabric, something that doesn't stretch out so much like we have here. So we're going to go to the library, we're going to go to fabric. Actually, there we go, double click on fabric and it brings up these different defaults. And I'm going to look for just a muslin fabric. It used to be in the beginning here. There we go. Now I've selected that, and now we see when we simulate, it is fitting tighter. Now we do have some chunky gathers here, and we can see that the virtual sewing kind of stretched this all out, so to speak. We know how to fix that from the last episode. I'm going to select the lower edges of the waistband. I'm holding down Shift so I get both of them. I'm going to turn on elastic. It's going to tighten it quite a bit because it has the 80% ratio by default. We're going to change that to 100 because we don't want it to gather up the waistband, but we don't want it to stretch it out either. So that is just fine for what we're doing. All right, now on to the idea of the godets. For this first one, we're going to make this into a pegged skirt. We're going to give it a center back seam, and we're going to insert the back godet so that we don't have to have a slit. It'll behave like a slit, but it's not going to open and expose the back of the legs. Now let's move on to the tapering of the skirt. I'm going to keep it at its full width at about 8 inches, 8.5 inches from the waist, and then I'm going to taper it in a few inches on each side. So trying to walk in this skirt would not be easy if there's not a back slit, or the equivalent of some way to where that back slit can open, but we're going to fill it in with that godet. So we're doing our X tool. I'm hovering here. I could eyeball it if I wanted to, but I'm just going to be precise by right-clicking. I'm going to make it 8.5 for line 1. Now line 2 is the blue one here. This is selected. Normally it would be this yellow, but that one is the one that I'm working on there. So we're going to click OK. Of course, it's both sides, same thing here. 8.5, OK. Now, on my grid, moving my cursor arrow, mine goes 1/8 of an inch each time. So I know if I move it 16 times, I'll get 2 inches. Now, I don't know what your grid is set to. I'm just hovering on the grid here. I'm going to right-click and click on Grid Properties. That's how you come up with being able to change the size of your grid, the distance, but also down here, 3D arrow key movement. Now, I made mine 1/8 of an inch. I really preferred a 1/16 of an inch, but it will not give me exactly 1/16 because it only goes by 3 numbers past the decimal, and I need 4 to get a true 1/16 of an inch. So that would not give me a full inch if I hit it 16 times. So since I wanted something more precise, I went down to the next lowest increment, which is the 1/8 of an inch. So now I'm taking this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that was one way to do a quick and dirty taper. And that happened there in the back. But let's say I don't want to go through all that. Now I could drop a little control point with the X tool 2 inches away from here, or I can move that, and again we're in our Z tool here. I can take it, start moving it. Oops, I have simulation turned on. Things will go a lot faster if you're not in simulation mode while you're working. So I'm going to move this over, and I could see, and if I wanted to eyeball it, you can see that the little purple numbers there telling me how far I've moved in. And I might get lucky and land on 2 inches, but to be more precise, I'm going to right click while this is still activated. I'm going to right click, and that's going to give me the pop-up for the total distance moved, or I can go by the length of this first segment here, or the distance of the dot that I'm moving, and then the X or Y axis. and I'm not moving anything on the Y yo-yo up and down axis. I'm going crosswise, and we wanted 2 inches, and we're going to click OK. And now we simulate to bring that in. So that's a pretty tight skirt. Not going to be so easy for her to walk in that. So this is where the godet is going to come in handy. Now I am going to use my Z tool, select this centered mirror line, I'm going to right click, and let's cut and sew. I'm going to split this apart so we can see what we're doing with that godet. Now I'm going to look at this in a transparent view so I can kind of get a visual of how high up I can go. Usually about 18 inches will get you comfortably past the booty, but let's take a look. Translucent, and I'm going to do kind of in this neighborhood here. You see I have that little dot, and I'm just going to do my X tool and give myself a dot there. And I'm 11.648. That's kind of an odd number. So I'm just going to delete the dot. I'm going to X again, and this time I'm going to right click, and let's just choose an even 12 inches. Now I want to change the stitching to not go all the way down to the bottom, because I want to create that godet and insert it in that location. So we go to our edit sewing tool, and I'm clicking on this, and you can see the relationship between the two going all the way up and down. So I'm just going to tap on and grab this endpoint, and it'll magnetize to the dot that we made. And now we have a slit. Let's go back to textured surface. And so now we need a godet that is 12 inches long, and let's do 12 inches wide. On the half, that would be 6 inches. So instead of doing the full rectangle and then splitting it in half and then doing the mirroring, we're going to do half of it, and then we're going to mirror it open. So I am going to do 6 inches wide by 12 inches tall, and we're going to click OK. Oops, I'm always doing that. I tap again a second time while I still have my drawing tool. So we'll hit Z. Actually, we're going to hit the A tool to kind of move this out of the way. Now you can see that it's way over here. The reason why it's way over there, of course, is because that's where it actually is in the 2D window. But we do not have the back of her in the 2D window, so we just need to either use our gizmo to tap a few times, activate it, and move it nearby. Or we could do the arrangement points, but I think this is just fine. Alright, so now getting our triangular piece, we are going to Z, delete, select and delete that line, and now we have a pretty good looking triangle. I'm going to right click, unfold, symmetric editing. Now you can see we kind of have a sharp point here. Since I angled this, it's no longer the nice tidy 12 inches. So this time I'm going to right click, change length, hit 12, and it's going to give me the option of changing at the end or the beginning. We want the end right here, so I'm going to click OK. Now that's a little bit severe, so I'm going to use my V tool to kind of give a little bit of a soft curve. And we have a godet. Now let's sew it in. And our segment sewing works just fine for this situation. I'm just hitting the A key so I can get out of sewing. And we're going to simulate. And now in its simplest form, we have a swishy little godet there. Now it would drape a little nicer in a different fabric, but the functionality is the same. Now let's say we wanted to insert a godet in the sides. We can do that easily. This would be good practice if you are new to using CLO. So I'm going to X, right click, and I want this here to be 12 inches. Click OK, and I'm going to Control C, Control V, and you can see that there. I need to do my 12 inches over here. Line 2, 12 inches. I'm moving the wrong thing. Let's hit a Control Z. Now you can see that I did a copy and paste here, and it stayed in its 2D state, of course, because it's the only thing it can do in the 2D window. But the draped state that it was in on the original one that I made the copy of, it inherited that, and that can be kind of handy. Let's see where I am. This is actually, see, I did the little dot there. I was turned around, and I'm actually working on this side right now. And I'll go ahead and do the second one and put it in position. Rotate that around. Now, like we did before on the back, you know what to do. We're going to edit the sewing, and we're going to insert that godet. Edit sewing, and we're going to lift this up to that dot, and this one here. So now that's free. We're going to do our segment sewing, this to this. Okay, I did something wrong there. Alright, so what's happening here? This godet that I used for the back was perfectly serviceable because it was inserting into a symmetrical seam. Now it thinks that these two sides should automatically sew into the same location, and that is not true. So in this instance, symmetric mirrored of the godet does not work. So we need to fix that. First thing we'll do is we'll get rid of this sewing because it would be a big mess. Just in case we didn't catch this, let's see what kind of a mess it would have actually been. I'm going to save before I make this mess. And in my history, I'm going to go ahead and save this 3D state just in case it's something that I can't undo. All right, so let's hit simulation. And so now it's trying to stitch to both sides. So if something like this ever happens to you, go back and check your sewing relationships. I'm going to hit Control Z, And it did put us back. Sometimes that doesn't work, so I like having those 3D states. And of course, if you keep saving multiple 3D states, delete the ones that you don't need because it will slow everything down. It just adds to the file. Alright, so how to fix this? We're going to first get rid of the sewing there. And I'm going to get rid of one of the godets. And we're going to hit Z. We're going to cut. And you can see the blue halo, that it's symmetrical. Now, I do want it to be symmetrical, but I don't need symmetrical editing. So I'm going to Z, click on the center. I'm going to right click, and I'm just simply going to unfold it. That's harmless enough. And what side are we on? We're on this side here. So now I can use my segment tool, stitch this to this, and the other side, if you need a visual, I'm going to move this over here so you can see that this will stitch to this. And hopefully we're in good shape there. Yes, we are. So since we stitched this together, oops, hit my number 2 key. Since we stitched this together, now when I copy and paste, and this is symmetrical and the backs are symmetrical, it should automatically stitch in over here. So let's give that a look. Control C, Control V. Now I am not seeing the stitching. Okay. Why am I not seeing the stitching? That's because I did not paste a symmetrically linked pattern. So I did not mirror it to be that way. So Control C, Control D. Now I'm going to do that. Now I get a symmetrically linked godet. Kind of swoosh that out. So just to recap on the difference, Control C and Control V just does a copy. Control C, I'm going to right click on this so you can see. Control C is copy, Control V is paste. It doesn't mirror it. You could mirror paste, but we actually want to have a mirror paste with symmetric editing. Now, I don't actually see, if you use this menu, I do not actually see the Control D. Have some mirror paste. That's interesting. So we could have symmetric pattern with sewing. I just know by heart that Control D will do a mirror paste and it will have linked editing. So that's not here, so just make a note. Control D is mirror paste with linked editing. Alright, so I don't know why this one right here isn't fanning out as nicely. There we go. Alright, so we have our side godets. Now this was in a seam. You don't have to have a seam to stitch in a godet. You could simply do some slits into the fabric and insert that godet. So let's do that as the last part here. Now somewhere about the middle, I will split this, or maybe I've decided that I want it to be more visually towards one side or the other. Let's do the internal line now. I'm going to elongate this however much I want. I'm just snapping it in a straight line. I'm going to right click and say I want 12 inches. And now I need to snip this. Now this may or may not slash it for me. It might be too narrow. If that's the case, I would need to kind of draw in that slit myself. So let's see what happens. I'm going to highlight, right click, and let's cut it and see if it'll allow us. Okay, it looks like it did, but that's going to be awfully difficult to stitch. So let's help it a little bit by selecting one of these. I'm holding down my shift key. So I just made the slit a little bit bigger so that I can see where I'm sewing. In real life, you would just do a snip. So Control C, Control V is just fine because I'm just duplicating this. I'm not doing the mirrored one with linked editing quite yet. So we know this is going to go into this slit. All right, now our sewing, we know segment sewing, this to this, this to this, simulate. Now you can see we're starting to get some dancing kind of movement here, just kind of fun. All right, now Control C, Control D, and we're going to get our blue halo. I call it a halo, it's an outline. Looks like it's kind of glowing, so I guess that's why it's a halo to me. And so now I simulate. And if I were you, if you just want to get in the practice, I would do another slit on the other sides and insert another godet. And that's it. Now you know how to slash and insert a godet. You can do it in the seams. If you wanted to, you can make these godets much taller. You can make them more pointed to be kind of handkerchief. You can use contrast colors, or you can make the godets sheer or lace. You can use these on a fitted skirt, you can use them on a dress, you can use them at the bottom of sleeves. Godets are quite versatile to add fullness wherever you like. Off camera, I'm going to go ahead and add another one to the front and to the backs here, and then we'll simulate in a prettier fabric, maybe a voile or a silk crepe de chine, something like that. I'll be right back. Okay, here is what I have done at this point. I have added shirring by selecting the upper waist area, and I used the shirring tool here. I turned that on for the front and back, so that streamlined it. I added the back godets to mirror the front, and I changed the fabric to a silk crepe de chine. I just took this and dragged it over here. So now you can see it's a more fluid drape. And the last bit I'm going to do just for presentation is I'm going to get rid of the grid. I'm going to change her to just a single color, and I'm going to change the background. So let's start with our form. I'm going to select all of her, and for her textures I'm going to delete those maps. Oops, little trash can there. Delete, delete. I think it's not deleting when I try to select everything all at once. Used to, as far as I remember. Okay, the shoes, I might have to do those separately. We'll just change those to black. And there's black, fine clothes. There might be an easier way to do this with this new base color map stuff. I just don't know what that is. Alright, so now let's see if I can select all of her, change, there we go. And now I'm going to select the back, format 3D background, solid color, I'm going to click OK. And now I'm going to get rid of the grid down here and show ground grid, move that out of the way. And I'm just going to show the skirt in the render. And we're not going to see these lines here in the render. We're just going to see the shape of the skirt. Okay, let's see if I can get this to flare out a little bit more. If I can get it to move in the wind and freeze it. If these were sheer, it might be a little more exciting. That's good enough. We'll do this here. And now we'll go, we're not in simulation mode, and we will now go to render. Render again. Click here to start the interactive render. Now, even though I have the background here in black, you see it's not showing up in my render. The background for the render is going to be different than the background in the 3D window. This would be ideal if I were just taking a screenshot. If I want it to have some tricky lighting, I can turn that on to get more of a shadow effect. I can turn off the schematic render if I wanted to. And this would be a quick and handy screenshot. Now, to get a little higher quality, this is where this would come in handy to do the actual render. Now, I don't want her arms in here actually, so I'm going to close this for a minute. Now, I could go and hunt for a T pose, but a quick way to handle this would be Shift X to get the avatar joints, I'm going to click on her shoulder, click on the little symmetrical gingerbread man so that whatever I do to one side happens to the other. Shift X again to turn that off. And now I can do just the skirt in my render. Render, render. And I'm going to do the little refresh button here to update. And I'm going to get it positioned just where I like it. Oops. Hitting the number 2, and I'm going to try that again. Turn her just a little bit. It's not perfect. I'm not a photographer, but if you are, you will probably do a much better job. Now, we are going to go to our scene. We just want the image. This is a very small image size. We could go a little bit bigger. And when we've changed the size, let's go 1080 by, I don't know, 1400. Get some leg in there. Now let's change our background color. Currently it is white. Let's do kind of an off black. Apply and close. There we go. And then we can do our lighting to different contrasts. Let's try checkerboard house. That's actually quite intense. Swimming pool is kind of cool. Now you can see that I'm kind of crinkly here. It's not a super smooth texture, and that is because my particle distance is not very high quality right now. If we look at the wireframe, it's nice and close where our shirring is, and that's why it doesn't look too bad right here. But now it looks like crumpled paper right here. Now I don't know if I can change this while I'm in render, but I would need to simulate again anyway. So I'm going to get out of render. I'm going to Control All, and I'm just going to change all of these to, let's change them to 8 and hit enter. And you immediately see the difference now. I'm going to simulate, and we have a much smoother texture, which we'll see in just a moment. If I can catch. Now it's kind of wild here. That's good enough. I'm going to get greedy. Ah, that's pretty. Alright, so we'll turn off the wireframe. See how smooth that is, even just in the 3D window. So I'm sure it's going to be even more beautiful now. So take a look at the crumpliness, and now we're going to hit refresh. Much nicer. So if you're wondering why your renders don't look great, particle distance, reducing the distance between particles, which is a lower number, is what you want to do. Alright, in our lighting, we want, you can change the noise threshold, the seam puckering. For the quality of the light and the material, we'll go high. Just for basic renders, I don't notice a big difference between high and very high. Once you have all of the settings, of course, we are going to stop this and now play it, so to speak. And it's going to create the render and automatically save it to a folder. That would be in this setting here, you could give it a name and where you want it to save. And there is the final render. This is at 67% and this is at 100%. So that's actually not bad. And that's it for this video. Happy practicing.